Good evening. Once again, it is my privilege and pleasure to come and spend these few moments of your time. So much is said about the law of attraction, what I call the law of magnetism. And in so many ways, it appears as if everybody is trying to draw to them onto a single shared playing field, as if there is one reality and everybody is in competition for it. However, shall we say, more closely related is the concept of multiverse. That is, many unlimited numbers of universes. One, shall we say, located within a common threshold, a common background as such. Shall we start a conversation?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for being with us again today. Just following from your opening statement about multiverses and the law of attraction, how does that then affect what we're being commonly taught about manifesting when we've got multiverses to consider?
Shall we say, whenever someone is taught the art of manifesting, often you are taught to put aside the old ideas that you have been suggested, that there is a limited supply. Shall we say, of course, within one realm there is a limited supply. Shall we say, if you are living on one earth, then its content, shall we say, of oxygen is limited. One could measure that. But if you are living on a multiverse, then every single version has its own amount, if you like. Each person is supplying whatever is within their realm of opportunity as such. Do you follow what I mean? So, of course, everything is relative to one's perceptions of it. Does that make some sort of sense? Because often you are talking about the solid world, and as we have pointed out, the solid world emerges from other realms of data as such, other realms of, shall we call it, singularity and points of focus. Does this make some sort of sense, and does it answer the immediate question?
Yes, yeah. So can we, if we're talking about each universe, or assuming reality, having its own, should we say, abundance, or if we've got a finite amount of something, say let's say money, in our current reality, can we manifest it from another universe, another reality?
If you have determined there is a limited, shall we say, amounts of money, a limited pile, shall we say, and that you have somehow locked away most of it in someone else's safekeeping, then of course you will not have enough. Do you follow what I mean? If, however, you realize that all of the opportunities are collected in your version, let us say, if you are not worthy of further, shall we say, increments, then of course it will stay in that position. If, however, let us say you have an idea that you want to accumulate more, then the pathway is open in many frameworks, shall we say. Then you put your $5 onto your tickets, and suddenly you are a millionaire. That is what you have deemed your value, shall we say, and often it is in order to learn how to take care of such finance. Often you find those that suddenly gain wealth are equally capable of losing it within an equally short period of time. Does this make sense? So shall we say your value is that you are providing a service that has the key to allowing great wealth. However, the key requires an opening, if you like, the ability to allow it to flow in. Does this make sense? Otherwise, you are fighting yourself on the inner realms. One idea is in conflict with another. You are in internal conflict.
So does it matter more that we believe that, well, I would believe that there's an infinite supply of money, there's an abundance of money, enough for all to go around, than it is that it's actually fact? The belief itself is far more important than whether it's true or not.
Shall we say this? You want to live in a world where there is enough to go around. And in whose world are you interfering? Do you follow? Because for some people there must be competition. So you are interfering in their version of the universe as it interacts. Does this make some sort of sense? Because the paradox is that each universe is completely separate at the same time as it is totally interactive.
So if we have a belief or that there's an infinite supply of money, that then interferes with others that need to experience something else.
Not in your own realm. If you understand that there is an infinite supply that you can tap into. Okay. Not that there is an infinite supply that everybody has to be given. Of course, because you understand money is nothing. Money is simply pieces of paper printed. They're is an infinite number of printing presses all over the world. You can print enough money to drown everybody, but it would have no worth.
Yeah.
Because worth arises from limitation. You understand why is gold important? Because it is limited. Why is price of oil go up? Because it is limited. Do you understand?
Yeah.
And the price of sand is going up because it is becoming more limited. Do you understand what I mean? Whereas, shall we say, the price of coal is decreasing because nobody wants it anymore.
Yeah.
This makes sense.
Yes, it does.
You understand? So money is irrelevant. The whole point of the law of attraction is not to attract worthless material, but to attract that which will give you fundamentally, shall we say, the willingness and the ability to explore reality. That is how to be happy and how to understand why you are in the physical plane enough that you can raise your consciousness so that you are no longer needing to be physically limited. Does this make sense? So, shall we say, when the new species arises, that is, once it takes formal control of the plane, it will not necessarily be totally focused in the physical reality, because it will be creating in a far wider planetary system. Does that follow?
Yeah.
So, shall we say, what truly occurs is you dream your reality into existence, just as you remember being asleep. Your reality is just as harmonious, just as exciting, and just as horrendous and frightening as you make it in your best dreams and your nightmares. Who is creating that? You want to think it is somebody else. But of course, when you wake up from your dream, you know it was just yourself. When you wake up in this dream, you will know it is just yourself.
Okay. Yep, thank you. So I have a question on behalf of Philip from Spain. Is physical life only expressed here on Earth, or is it also found in other places and in other forms? And if so, has there ever been or will there ever be contact?
You understand, of course, consciousness frames itself in many different locations. But each one has a framework that, shall we say, operates for its own elements. In terms of physicality as human, shall we call it, the animal perspective, all of it as far as one is concerned, you understand, it is difficult to answer because consciousness takes place in all things. Even, shall we say, the grain of sand has a certain value in terms of consciousness. And one cannot truly perceive the value from, shall we say, the animal perspective. It seems as if it is of little or no consequence. But solidifying as such is an act of imagination. Does this follow? So, shall we say, if you want to create another experience in another universe, as many people have done, then you will experience memory of that version. This, but it is not. It is not a focus reality. You understand? The focus reality is the one you find yourself experiencing. That is why it is the position of focus, why alternate realities exist in all manner of sequences. And there is a consistency between the position of focus that you find yourself in, shall we say, your common experience, and those that one might choose as alternate are ones that are consistent with it, not inconsistent. Shall we say, you will not be holding, shall we say, such an extreme version and make sense of it. I want. Does that seem to answer the question?
I was wondering.
Complex.
Sorry. Yeah. So in terms of like what we humans on planet Earth, is there anything else that's similar? Is there any other non-Earth planets that are similar to Earth? Then?
I want to say there are those that are imagining them into existence. You understand? All of it is an imagination anyway. All of it is not as solid real as it is a creation of form. So, of course, if you want to create an alternative, one simply has to ask, for what purpose? Do you follow? There are often alternative, shall we say, purposes. For, shall we say, you could create a reality where the form is quite capable, shall we say, of flying in the air. And that is as if one were, shall we call it, a bird in your common terms. Nothing is wrong with that. Consciousness, shall we say, in the nature of, shall we call it, a less solid being, calling it, shall we say, spirit-like, of course, then there are those that already occupy that alternative view. Do you follow what I mean? Nothing is stopping anything.
So anything that we can imagine, is that what you're saying?
Of course, anything you can imagine, put your consciousness into it with enough degree of focus, and you will leave this version and enter in that one.
Physically?
Of course. And of course, one of the ultimate difficulties, you understand, is then one's history has to be unwound, if you like, so that those that, shall we say, have interacted with your present version have no memory of it. Otherwise, it will be confusing. You will be interfering in someone else's expansion. There have been examples of this. And some of those people have found it extremely difficult to cope. Shall we say then there is sometimes, shall we call it, break in the conscious flow. Such people are often deemed to be mentally unstable and so forth.
But if we wanted to create the reality and we're flying in another space, in another place, we can do that. But do we have to die a physical death here first, and then that's the reality that we can create possibly next?
You cannot, consciousness focuses in a reality. Consciousness, shall we say, shared consciousness, of course, focuses in all realities at all times, because that is what it is. This is the framework, shall we say. But an individual focus has a limited period of attainment, if you like. Time as a creation goes through a period of appearing and, shall we say, experiencing and then completing its experience. Nothing then is, there is no point in something lasting forever. You understand? Unless it is a big enough experience.
Okay.
So shall we say, an Earth-like planet will experience a very long period of emanation as many changes are occurring within and on the outside of it. It is party to a many forms.
Okay, thank you. Moving on. So Melissa from Northland, New Zealand would like to know if food allergies or intolerances are real, or is there a bigger reason why she seems to get stomach pain or digestive issues every time she eats?
Of course, because everything has to be digested. And when you digest something, you are, shall we say, breaking it down to its fundamental forms and assuming responsibility for it. Shall we say then, if one considers that there are elements within the world that are indigestible, that you cannot take in, you reject, if you like, as if one is fundamentally part of the whole. Shall we put it this way? Let us say, for instance, in your current situation. You think that the concept of plastic is indigestible. One cannot have it on your planet. Then you are rejecting it in total, and it is, shall we say, impacting on your system. Do you follow what I mean? Then many other things, particularly those that have anything to do with plastic of any form whatsoever, will become less and less digestible. Your body will begin to respond and react to it. Rather than if one understands that the plastic is a problem that has a solution, that you do not have to be involved in promoting it nor rejecting it, but assuming that there is a solution that will arise, that it is not your responsibility to react with it. Does this make some sort of sense? So you are not, if you like, joining the whole response. It is a difficult topic, you understand, because many people are emotionally connected. Whatever anyone says about it provokes emotional response, of course.
Are you talking about plastic or?
In this case, I am simply using this as an example.
So you're talking about being a difficult subject with the emotional response in terms of her original question?
I am talking in terms of even commenting on the question at all, because whatever I say will provoke an emotional response, as if whatever I am saying is party of the problem, rather than assuming that the problem arises because of the creation of it. You understand, because of the lack of responsibility for taking care, you understand, of your environment, not just, shall we say, the physical, but the mental and emotional environment, the climate. So, shall we say, most people are involved in a climate that is not socially beneficial. You understand? Then there are poor people and rich people. Straight away you have a climate problem. Do you understand? It is not a physical one, of course. It has emotional components, of course, but it is, shall we say, a conservative problem. It is a mental or theoretical problem brought about by a lack of, shall we call it, responsibility, and a lack of understanding of the benefits for everyone of a degree, shall we say, of bringing about a creative nature, shall we say, then, that everybody has some gift, if you like, something to add to the social cohesion. But if you isolate and separate out and cause challenges, then you will get responses, and the social cohesion will begin to break down, and many consideration. Many reactions and responses arise from this. The climate begins, shall we say, to cloud over. There will be storms. Storms, shall we say, are always localized. One does not have, shall we say, one giant earth storm that has yet to be manufactured. Do you understand? But there are storms happening all over, and you do not understand the connection between the physical, emotional, mental, and the, shall we call it, the spirit, or rather the consciousness that plays out in these forms.
So what advice could you give Melissa and those like Melissa that are experiencing this to help resolve this issue?
Shall we say the first thing is to come off all of the judgments. Put aside judgment of anything and anyone. It is acceptance, and if you like, shall we say, what are you going to attract in? Because if you focus your attention on solving the problem, shall we put it this way, you put your attention on it, you say, here is the problem, it is a reaction to materials in my diet. Now you have a problem. If you even put your attention on the solution to my problem, you still have the problem. If you take your attention off it and allow it to, shall we say, transform, allowing that there will be a period of time before the evidence has worked through the system. Does this make sense? Yes. The body has to be given new information. Do not bother with responding to this. The climate has changed. It is no longer the issue that it seems to be. Of course, the body will not immediately change its response because it takes much longer. Shall we say, you have an idea. You think you think something is the way it is, and then suddenly you recognize it is not that way. It is almost instantly you can change your mind. And then your emotional response will take quite a bit longer for it to, shall we say, fade away. The physical nature will take even longer because it is more solid in its vibrations. So give it time. First of all, change your mind. Secondly, allow your emotions to dissipate around it. And finally, watch for the physical evidence to dissipate. Does this make some sort of sense?
Yes, fantastic. Thank you.